This holiday, I took the children on 2 different cultural visits. One was very much my choice, the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, and one was very much their choice, the Warner Brothers Studios in London, for the Harry Potter world experience. Neither of them were intended as Patternlog trips, but actually I was inspired by both, so I'm going to combine them today for a bit of a Patternlog mashup. The trip to the Ashmolean was very much a whistle-stop tour, so I just took photos that I'm going to share with you, things that caught our eye and appealed to us. The Egyptian section was definitely a very interesting area for all of us. The mummies were so beautiful, all these earthy tones, bold shapes, stripes, dots, cross-hatching, checks. There were lots of winged shapes, and I just loved the simplicity of some of the lines and the faces of the mummies. As you can imagine, there were patterns everywhere, whether they were made up of hieroglyphics or more organic shapes. As I followed the kids round at a pace, we were jumping from one era to the next. In the Roman era, on display was a mummy of a young woman. It had been woven with bandages, and there was this sort of 3D effect. She had a painted face that almost felt like it was from a different age. There were vessels and urns everywhere. I didn't take in the details, but I loved the overall feeling of them all. I really like the mixture of pictures and kind of graphical repeated patterns. So with this urn, with its sort of octopus squid-like creature, but then also its dots and shapes around the top, which just feel purely for decoration. I love this guy for his colours, but also his simplified hair, the shapes in his headdress, and the boldness of his face. And the figure is built up in relief, so his thigh muscles sort of stand proud of the surface. I really like the plants actually growing up around him like crops. There was lots of costume on display. These made the kids laugh, these very wide children's trousers. I loved all the detail of the embroidery and the graphicness of some of the patterns. These Chinese clothes were absolutely exquisite. The museum is full of textiles, from tiny little fragments of pattern to large wall hangings. I really like this beautiful silk wall hanging with wisteria all along the top and cranes, or maybe they're herons, below. I really loved these beautiful beaded bags from the 17th century. There's birds on them, beautiful flowers. They were called sweet bags, and some of them would have been filled with herbs. The kids didn't have as much time for the ceramics as I would have hoped, but I could have looked at them all day. Each plate seemed to tell a story. I love this leaf-shaped plate. This tiled piece, which combined these 3 vessels and then lots of curving foliage, had really caught my eye and has definitely inspired some work that I've done since. My original reason for coming to the Ashmolean was actually the pre-Raphaelite exhibition that was on. The children weren't quite so interested, but I managed to give them a game of finding all the Jane Morris images. They started off just looking for her name, but then after a while her striking features became familiar and they could just spot her from the paintings. Mo was a bit surprised that this was described as a cartoon. It's a phrase that I've always found funny. I really love the Gothic shapes that frame these angels for a stained glass window designed by Edward Burne-Jones. Then just a week or so later we were transported to a completely different world. But in fact, there were so many similarities. The Harry Potter sets are absolutely amazing. If you haven't been, I do recommend it. In the Gryffindor common room, these beautiful wall hangings are actually scanned reproductions of the Cluny tapestries. Mythical beasts, hunting scenes, flowers, oak leaves, everything beautifully adorning the walls really adds a richness to the sets. The potion-making classroom, with all of its vessels and little cork stoppers and all the labelling that had been so carefully designed, was really, really spellbinding, excuse the pun. There were lots of the characters' costumes on display. I was drawn to this beautiful waistcoat and all of the fabrics used. I love all the texture and the layering and how they aged all these garments. The designers created millions and millions of goblets, and this reminded me of being in the Ashmolean, all these vessels that have all these intricate details and symbolism. Lots of the imagined architecture of Hogwarts is actually incredibly influenced by a very familiar Gothic style. I love these Tudor roses and all the Gothic shapes. The model making alone was enough to justify the visit. The detail is just immense. I can just imagine the designers really carefully taking a scalpel to these Gothic details on this enormous window. Outside the studios, you could actually walk across the bridge that was designed to take you into Hogwarts, and you can see the beautiful Gothic carving of all these shapes at the top. I noticed the shape of a snitch, which is the ball used in Quidditch, the Harry Potter game. My daughters have an encyclopedic knowledge of Harry Potter, and they were having to tell me what all of the different rooms and sets were as we went round. But each and every one of them was so impressive, so even though I'm not specifically into the stories like they are, I was really, really impressed. Every single building, every set, every prop really, really had an attention to detail that blew me away. Gringotts Bank was really impressive with this amazing Art Deco feel. I couldn't believe the marble wasn't real. The children loved the vault with all of the gold goblets. I think the biggest impression on me was the overall architecture of Hogwarts. We walked into this room with this huge, huge model lit from all different angles with the colours changing. It was so absorbing to look at the detail of the building. The graphic design throughout was brilliant. I love this sweet shop packaging and this tapestry for the Black family tree, where different people had been scorched out of history. Unlike other pattern logs where I've lifted direct details from my trips and created patterns out of them, the work I've created after these 2 trips are a weird amalgamation. Some of the work I've done afterwards felt a bit more like wood carving. Using an earthy colour palette and quite bold lines, I've created designs with harvest flowers, arches, Gothic shapes. All of this is unexpected, but I really like seeing what emerges in my work, seeing where the inspiration comes from.